So I'm excited to share with you all my testimony today. Basically, I just want to be sharing the journey that God has taken me through in the past, well, I guess my whole life, but especially in the last, half of my life. And I've thought for a while maybe it'd be a good idea for me to do a video and just record my testimony to be able to share it with others and testify of God's goodness in my life. And so I'm going to try to do that today. This may be broken up into different clips because um, last time when I tried to edit it, the video crashed, and so I might need to be breaking it into smaller videos so it's more manageable on the editing side. So anyway, yeah, I'm just gonna dive into my testimony and just talk about what God has done in my life. I hope God speaks to you through it, and hopefully it's entertaining as well. So, anyway, a little bit about myself. I'm originally from Northern Kentucky, near Cincinnati, and so my parents raised me in the church and went to non-denominational Christian church. And my dad had grown up in the church his whole life, and my mom um, got baptized when I was 5. And yeah, so I went to church and I learned a lot about God and the Bible through church, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed spending the time with the people there, and also just like learning about God and Bible. That sounds really spiritual. I basically just enjoyed church. Um, I didn't growing up. I didn't really rebel too much. I found a lot of my identity in being intelligent and doing well in school, and so I placed a priority or premium on that. And I mean, I was succeeding by doing what I was supposed to do, so I just kept going. Which kind of sounds like the older brother and the prodigal son. You got to watch out. And so anyway, but I went to church, and yeah, as you know, when I got into high school, um, I basically was presented like, hey, we have a baptism night coming up. Is that something you're interested in? And when I was younger, like 10 and 11, I wasn't really thinking I was ready, and so I said no at that time. But for some reason, I felt like it was the right time. Basically, just intellectually made sense. So, like, I understand that I'm sinful and I need a savior, and so there's Jesus making a way. Like, that sounds like a good idea. Yes, let's do that. So I was baptized, and um, when I was 14, and I continued to grow in my faith. I was pretty involved in my youth group, helping out there, and involved in a small group, and got to go on some different mission trips and conferences in Florida, and I just had a lot of fun. I don't know, in community and learning about God. And but I remember one time in Florida, I was talking to like my leader, and I was basically saying, "Hey, I don't really think that I love God, honestly. I just we say that, but I don't know if I really do." And he basically said, "Hey, don't worry about it. Like, just keep seeking God, and like that'll kind of come, like as you know God more." And clearly that stuck out enough to me that I remember it now, and so I've continued to grow in my faith since then. So then high school ended, and I went to Purdue for college, which is in Indiana, and I didn't know anybody there, but I was really excited to like kind of start fresh in a new state. And so I looked at several colleges, and I knew that Purdue had a lot of good Christian organizations, and so I went there and like pretty much immediately got plugged into Crew or Campus Crusade for Christ. And there's some guys who lived in my same dorm room who are a little bit older than me, and they took me under their wing, and yeah, it was really foundational for me. I mean, I was able to make friends, praise God through that, but then also grow in like discipleship. I was discipled, and even in evangelism. And evangelism was not like my favorite thing, but like when we were doing it, it was like, oh, how about this? We're literally doing what the Bible says we're supposed to be doing. So that was really good and challenging for me. And so yeah, I grew a lot my freshman year in college, and just really thankful to be making my faith my own. And then coming out of my freshman year, I was really expecting to get a job because I was studying chemical engineering, and I didn't get an internship basically, which wasn't that uncommon, but in my mind I was like, oh man, I should have an internship, but I didn't, and so I went back home after my freshman year and got a job at a drive-through, and so that was a little bit humbling for me, but God was in it, and got to spend some time with my family and just friends from high school that summer. And so I came back to college that next semester, my sophomore year, and I was like really driven to get a job, like another internship, or a internship since I hadn't had one. And yeah, it was really like a desire of mine to get a good job. And then also people in crew were saying, "Hey Brent, would you want to like disciple someone? Would you want to do this kind of leadership?" And I was kind of like, yeah, I'd like that. But honestly, I wasn't really wanting it that much at that point. But anyway, I was still involved in crew and trying to learn how to disciple and whatnot. And so anyway, I got an internship in Houston, and it was all far away, and I'd never been to Houston. Been to Texas once, but yeah, I was kind of like, oh man, that's a big move. But I got an internship, and a lot of my friends were like, Brent, don't go. You should stay. But then one girl, she was like, Brent, that sounds like God. Like if God is telling you to go somewhere, like you need to go. And I was like, wow, I think you're the only one speaking truth to me. And so anyway, I moved to Texas, and it was not a necessarily easy move. I mean, I was in the middle of my college life, and I moved 1,000 miles away to Texas, and yeah, I basically start over. But God definitely had me all the way through. I arrived in Texas in 2011, and didn't know anybody. But I quickly tried to get plugged into a church, and so on like the third or fourth church I visited, I sat right next to this guy who's also like an intern and had been there like about the same time as me, like a few weeks. And he was an intern at NASA, and I was like, wow, this is some timing that I'm sitting right by you. And it's just like, okay, God. And so I got connected to him, and there's like a whole community of NASA interns, and like there's a Bible study group basically that some of the full timers like poured into the co-ops. And so like that was my community when I was in Texas, and I was super thankful for them. I grew a ton, just in like what it means to be a good worker for the Lord at work and be a Christian, and you know kind of helped me out in the transition out of college. I was learning about it while I was in college, and so yeah, I grew a lot through that and made some really good friends. But it was also really hard because I wanted to be at Purdue because that's where a lot of my friends were, but I was in Texas, and um, yeah, it was just really challenging and kind of lonely season. Um, but in April that year, the Passion Conference was in Fort Worth, and I was like, oh, this is sweet. Like I've always wanted to go. I've known about it for 10 years or something, and now I can go. And so, in a weekend in April, I went up with some of my friends to Fort Worth, and it was a really powerful conference, and I was excited to be there. And then I don't really remember exactly what happened, but Francis Chan spoke, and then someone's leading worship, and I I like broke down crying, and I was just really it was a really hard season, and felt I don't want to be here, blah blah blah. But I felt like God really was touching me in that moment and just like comforting me, and basically saying like, hey, it doesn't mean you're here forever. Like you're here right now, and like I'm with you. And I had a picture of God like holding me, and so it was like very powerful. I was just like crying for like 5 or 10 minutes, and I didn't cry very often then, and so uh, and then afterwards, my friends talking to me like during lunch, like nothing happened. I'm like, dude, like give me a minute. Like I just had a moment with God. But anyway, whatever happened, it like marked me. And I had always been more cerebral, and I feel like my emotions and my faith really got connected in that moment. And I was very, anyway, it just like changed me because before in college, I was like, I don't really honestly want to lead. But then after that, I came back that summer to college, and I was like, let's lead a Bible study, let's do this. And I was like genuine and really desiring it. And so, yeah, God really met me there at that place. And then, yeah, so then college continued. I was focused on school and being involved in crew. And then the one chemical company I was working for, they didn't ask me back once, and then I was like, oh dang it. But then I got an offer like a week or two later from Exxon for a different internship, and so I did one internship in Exxon, the same area of town, and so I got to be kind of like a older intern. I was in my fourth year, and a lot of the Exxon interns, they're probably 20 or 25, and a lot of them were sophomores, and so I got to be like an older figure, and I don't know, we had a lot of fun. But it was really cool is that we had our NASA Bible study group, but the Exxon people didn't always want to come to that one, and so halfway through the semester I started leading a Bible study for Exxon co-ops, and we had like 10 out of 20 or 25 come. I was like, wow, this is like really something. And so that was a privilege, is just being able to walk through the Bible with people, and also just like, man, like God is using me at this company. Like that's pretty wild. And yeah, so thankfully I did well enough to get a full-time offer, and so I went into my last year of college knowing that I had an offer. And yeah, super senior year happened. I graduated from college. I was kind of ready to get out of there by then. And yeah, so I came to Texas full time, working at Exxon. But then once I came back to Houston, it was a lot different than what I had expected. A lot of my friends had gotten married coming out of, while I was finishing up college. And so it's just kind of like oh, this is a lot different environment than I was at before. And um, also, my work was a lot more challenging and difficult than I imagined it would be. I was putting in a good number of hours and realizing, like, man, I got to put in like way more even to be like average here. And so it was really challenging. And um, yeah, I honestly felt kind of inadequate a lot in that season and wasn't quite sure where, I was like, this is not quite what I imagined, basically. And just adjusting from college was still difficult, even though I had some friends in the area. And so, yeah, that's kind of a difficult year. But then after that, I started visiting Houston's First Baptist, and then started attending there, which is like a mega church. And there were like tons of singles, and I was like really thankful and really needing that, because I needed some people in the same life stage I was at. And so I got plugged into a Bible study group, or like 100 people, a Sunday school class, whatever you want to call it. And it was like awesome. It was so encouraging. I mean, at a mega church, you have like a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds, and we welcome everybody. But like I found there's like a significant portion of people who are like pretty serious about God, and so I got plugged into that group and was learning a lot about God, and living as a young single in Houston, and just taking my faith seriously. And then at the beginning of 2016, we did like a 21-day Daniel fast, and I was like, oh, I don't want to do a Daniel fast. I'll do an electronics fast. And so I basically just only used electronics when I needed to. But for me, that was like actually very impactful, because I had like a big margin of time that I didn't have before, and God really spoke to me in that time, because yeah, I just had a lot of space to hear from God. And yeah, I started learning about things like intimacy with God, and I'm like, I don't even know what that is, but I think I'm understanding it like just abiding with God throughout the day. And yeah, just like very impactful. And so, like in that season, one of my friends, she gave me a book about intimacy with God, and I was like, oh, sweet. And I read it, and the first three-fourths were like super good, and then the last fourth was about speaking in tongues, and I was like, well, that's kind of weird, but I mean, the rest of the book was pretty good, so I don't know, maybe it's real, or who knows. And so then at the end of the book, and I go, this might be kind of weird for some people, but at the end of the book, it talked about like, here's how you can try to speak in tongues. And so I tried to speak in tongues, and I could do it. And it sounded like Chinese to me, and it's like very complicated. It wasn't like I'm saying two syllables. It was like a full language. And I was like, what the? And I've never been, I can't speak Spanish. I can't, I took Latin in high school. We didn't even speak that. And so I'm like, this is very unfamiliar to me. and it's happening. And so I'm like recording it, and I'm putting it, up against Google Translate, and Google Translate isn't telling me what language it is. But anyway, it like blew my mind. I was like, wow, this is real. And like, if this is real, what else is real that I haven't been told about, honestly? Because I didn't have like negative opinion about speaking in tongues. I just, I didn't know anything about it. And so that really stirred up a hunger for God for me. At another level, I was already pretty hungry for God and seeking after God, but yeah, I was just like really curious after that. All right, so after that, I was speaking in tongues and going to a Baptist church. So I was a little confused about my place, but I had signed up to go on a mission trip to Brazil, and I was like really fired up about that, really excited. And one of my roommates on that trip, he was like, um, you know, really going after God, and he was fired up and teaching me about healing and prophecy and all these things. And I was like, whoa, like, wow, this is all new to me. So I was really excited and just fired up for what God had done in my life and what He was teaching me in that time as well. And so, yeah, I was just like excited to be in Rio de Janeiro, and we're just praying for people and talking to people, and it was just really, really powerful. Last time I gone on a mission trip was like 6 years before that. So, um, yeah, just like really marking. And so I came back from that trip like really invigorated and envisioned for like, I don't know, giving the Lord more of my life. And yeah, I was just like so, like really wanted to be surrendered to God. And I know that like there's a lot of pressures and a lot of things vying for our attention, but I came back from that trip and I was just like, man, God, like I surrender everything to you, like for real. Like you can have my job, you can have my future wife, you can have, my friends, whatever. God, I just give it all to you. God, I want what you have for me. And so I did that and I meant it. And then yeah, proceeded with my day and time. But then about 4 months later, I found out that I was going to get laid off from my job. And oil prices have been kind of low, but I thought I was pretty immune. And so, I mean, at first I was like, how could this happen to me? Blah, blah, blah. But then also I was like, I just prayed about this. I just prayed that God would, like, take my job. And He did actually take it. And so I was like, actually, I mean, it was tough, right? I thought I was going to spend my whole career there, and I only lasted over 2 years. But I knew that like God was in it. I'm like, I really feel like God is in this, because I was really hungry for God in that time and just like wanting more time with God. And I was like, well, would you look at that? I got way more time to spend with God now. Um, and so yeah, then I found myself unemployed. But thankfully, I had a pretty good severance pay, and so I was being paid my normal salary for like 4 more months. And I guess I won't go through all the details, but basically, I was looking for a job, and yeah, I just had a lot of time with God and a lot of trial and error. If you've seen that movie Groundhog's Day, I haven't seen it, but I've heard the concept. It's kind of like living the same day, and it's like over time, it's like I'm actually getting good at this. It's like I would wake up kind of depressed or sad, and but I'd like put on the worship music and like really seek after God. Spend like the whole morning seeking after God. And like by lunch I'm like fired up. I'm like, what do I have to worry about? God is my defender. He's my provider. He's so good. And it's like anyway, God just guided me through it. Definitely the first 4 or 5 months were still pretty hard, but yeah, I mean, I just learned so much through unemployment. Just having all that time to like get involved. I did perspectives class, learning about missions. I was exploring like, hey, maybe I should go to seminary or something. And so I visited some seminaries with a friend and learned, all right, this is what that looks like. And actually didn't feel like that was quite what God was leading me to do in that time. But yeah, and then in the job hunt, even the job hunt, I was like, applying all these jobs on LinkedIn and Indeed, and nothing was coming up for a while. And then one of my friends was like, hey, like, have you been praying? And I'm like, yeah, I've been praying. No, they're like, have you really been praying? It's like, yeah, I guess I could be praying more. And so they're like, that's how you're gonna get a job is by praying. And so like I did that, and I think I forget the timing, but it was like the next day or something. I had an interview, and I was like, oh, this is how this job hunt is gonna be done. And so like I just learned about how God is leading, and how prayer is like a such a key conduit to make things for how things actually work, because God makes things actually work. He's got the cattle on 1,000 hill. So, and yeah, so I learned a lot in unemployment. Also, I just had a lot of time, and so I'm like, hey, let me try to prophesy. I guess I'll just start texting people random stuff and see if it speaks to them. And so I'm like texting the girl from high school. I'm like, really, God, that's who you want me to text? And I'm like, praying for you. Hope you're doing well. And she's like, hey, thanks. It's my first day in this new job. And I'm like, oh, wow. Y'all, praise God. Have a good day. And that like kept happening. It's like, wow, God, seems like this timing is working out pretty well. And I'm saying exactly what people need to hear a lot of the time. And so that was really encouraging to me, that God could speak to me, or to others through me. And I was learning about prophecy, also healing. I mean, I watched a lot of videos about people getting healed, and I was I'm like, how do I not know about this before? And so I got to pray for some people to get healed, and like not all the time, but sometimes they got healed. And I wasn't like, I can be a little bit shy, and so like I got my bold friends going for it. I'm like, yeah, take me with you. But I just like saw a lot of my faith invigorated, and also I dream a lot, and I've known that I've dreamed a lot, and then people were like, hey, that could be God speaking through your dreams. And so I started writing them down, and asking God to help me interpret them. And I like started seeing more stuff in my dream life, and I'm like, man, God's speaking in so many ways, and just in circumstances and timing. And I go to these interviews in random cities, and it's like I feel like I'm on a mission from God no matter where I go. I mean, I like structure. As I've been an engineer and I've got my degree, but like just like following God, find a lot of freedom in that. And so I was unemployed for 11 months before I got a job, and that's kind of a long time. But once the severance ended, I got unemployment money from the government, and so like the last week of the unemployment money happens, and like that's when I get my job offer. And I'm like, wow, nice, God. And yeah, someone had encouraged me during unemployment. They're like, hey, Brent, you don't need to worry about like this season. Like God has you where you're supposed to be, like in the in between. And I was like, oh, okay, thanks. And that was really encouraging to me. And so yeah, I got that job offer, and it's like a shock. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to change up my routine. I gotta move to a different part of the city. Um, anyway, but it all worked out. But also like the timing, I was planning to go to Germany on a mission trip to work with refugees, and so I like accepted my job offer like the day before that trip. And so it was just like crazy timing. And I'm like, all right, God, guess I'm going to Germany. It's like I got a job celebration trip. And so that trip was awesome, just like seeing God move among the refugees. And there had been like hundreds of refugees who come to Christ in that movement. And I got to baptize a guy, uh, and just like super powerful, and just like, wow, God is moving powerfully, in this area. And yeah, just like really stirred my faith. Um, yeah, and then I came back to Houston and got ready for my job. Also, before I forget, I also got involved in a homeless ministry and got to serve there and like preach a few times while I was unemployed. So grew a lot through that too. Okay, so now I was employed, and I moved to a different location, and it's just a different season. Like, okay, I got a job now. I gotta, I still want to be passionately pursuing the Lord, but I got to do this job, and I still want to hang out with my friends. And yeah, so it was a little bit of a struggle to like fit everything in and figure out how it worked. And it's just like I can't be praying 30 minutes a day. I mean, technically I can't, but it just didn't work. I don't know, but just a lot going on. And yeah, so eventually I visited Antioch Community Church, and I was, I've been kind of there's a little tension in the Baptist church with me operating the gifts. Not like I was being forced out, definitely not, but I just had a desire to be with like-minded community who was pursuing that kind of thing. And so, I visited Antioch, and this one guy's like prophesying over me, like during worship, like right away, and is pretty encouraging. And I could just see a hunger for God, and yeah, a desire for more of Him. And anyway, I was really thankful for that, and so I started getting plugged in there with a life group. And there, I mean, I mentioned I had done some prophesying, but it was really just been through like text messaging. And so at Antioch, I grew a lot more in like prophesying over people in person, and yeah, just seeking after God, and also learning about obedience to God. Obviously, it's all over the Bible, but they took it seriously, and they're like, no, we need to be obeying what the Lord says. And it's like, oh, let's do that. And let's hear from God for ourselves, and obey what He's calling us to do. And so that was pretty easy to get behind. And so yeah, I got plugged in there. And then after like I've been in that one job a year, I got laid off from that one too. And I'm like, come on, so then I'm unemployed again. But during that summer, I got plugged into a group who was reaching out to refugees in Houston, and that was like awesome because I've been to Germany the last summer, and that was really cool. And I'm like, man, they're in my city, and I'm getting to help out. So that was awesome. And then this job hunt was way faster. So it was at Dow that I was a contractor before, and then I had an interview at a different company in the morning, and that interview went poorly. It was like pretty clear. I always pray for clarity in the job interview, so that led to a lot of interviews going badly. Like, all right, well, that's not a fit. And so I like got lunch, and then I went to the library and hung out at the library before my interview, and I ran into my coworker from my previous job at Dow, and he's like a Christian. And this is right before my interview, and I'm like, wow, this is some timing. I'm seeing you right before my interview. And he's like, oh yeah. Well, he's like, well, I'll be praying for you. He's like, I had a job like that. Back when I was younger, I had a job like that. And I was like, wow. I really felt like it was an angel kind of experience. I mean, it felt like an angel. I didn't feel like he was an angel, but it was just like, wow, I feel like super encouraged. And I came into that interview with a ton of confidence. Like God is like with me. And the interview went super well. I'm in there saying nerdy things like I love to learn, and they're like, we love that in R&D. Like, they give me an offer right there, and I'm like, wow, this is awesome. And so I accepted that job offer, and that's the same job that I'm in right now. Actually, I've been doing it about 3 years. And so yeah, with that, I was like a team leader, and I've got 3 technicians. I don't need to get into all the details, but there's definitely like a promotion from my old job. So definitely thankful for like God providing that. So with church, I was plugged into Antioch, and I knew they had a training school, and basically that seemed like really interesting to me. I didn't feel like seminary was the right thing, but this training school seemed like, oh, this will be really good because they talk about missions and evangelism, and they talk about like personal wholeness and encountering God. And I was like, man, these are all things I'm fired up about. Like, let's do it. So I did this school from 2018 to 2019, and definitely stretched me in some areas and some things I didn't like. I know fasting was not a favorite of mine, but there's like a lot of different areas I grew a lot, and just kind of submitting myself to teaching and the leadership. God, yeah, we worshipped a lot. We had some experiences at ATS, and it was fun. I'm laughing. Uh, Got to pray for people, prophesy for people. They prayed for me. Yeah, I'm not going to get into everything, but it was just a really good year for me, like maturing, I feel like, in my faith, in community, and helping me grow in areas that I like to ignore because I just want to focus on what I'm good at, but help me become more well rounded, which is great. And then after the training school finished, I was a little bit like, oh, what do I do now? I've had like 8 hours a week focused to this, and now I don't have anything. Uh, or, it's just an adjustment, right? And so after that, I started going to the Central Houston campus of Antioch and getting plugged in there. Um, yeah, I mean, just basically got involved and plugged in and kept growing in my faith and seeking God. That I don't feel like that much happened that year, but then COVID happened, like 2020, and so that was like, obviously unexpected, but uh, anyway, I was prepared for it. So, you know, continued to grow my faith by myself at home and hanging out with people as well. And I got involved with some people um, doing refugee work consistently who like lived among the refugees, and they were like a key friend group for me in that season during COVID, and continued to be so. Just learning about missions and discipleship and seeing it lived out, and so that's super encouraging. And then also during COVID, I stepped up into being a life group leader. I actually hadn't been in leadership in anything at church since college, and yeah, so it's like I feel like the timing's right. Like let's do it. And so the last year I've been growing in leadership, and just not just complaining, but focusing on other people, which are great things. It's like, all right, I'm here to serve. Like, let's make this a great community and pour into other people. And so, yeah, I've been life group leading with my co leaders. And what else? Yeah, missions. Oh, yeah. And then, so now it's like May 2021. And yeah, I've been growing a lot in prayer this year in 2021. So in 2016 and 2017, when I was unemployed, I grew a ton in my prayer life. And then it's kind of been like a slow, increase in prayer. But like in the last year, I've realized like, man, like I can pray when I'm praying with other people. So let me call people on the phone all the time. And so, yeah, I've been praying on Zoom calls and different things, and that's been super encouraging. Also, I bought a piano keyboard like 2 years ago. I've been playing a little worship music on that, which has been good. I mean, I love to read, as you can tell, but there's just like, it says to love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength. And so if I only love God with my mind, like, I mean, that's cool, but there's a lot more. So I've been learning that. But anyway, God has done a lot in my life, and He's not done. I can tell you that. But yeah, I just been, just I thank God. Even as I recount this, it's just like, man, God has done a lot in my life, and it's easy to think, God, where are you? I'm tired of waiting on you. Blah blah blah. But God is faithful, and I'm just really thankful for what God has done in my life. And I feel like, Matthew 6:33 says, "Seek first God's kingdom, and all these things will be added unto us." And so I've really tried to do that. And I mean, I'll just add like a lot of this time, in the second half of from 2016 to 2020, I'm just like, man, like I'm not worried about marriage. It's like I'm ready to seek after God, and that can happen when it happens. But like I want to pursue God first, and so that's been my goal. And yeah, I've definitely been growing a lot. I'm not perfect. I struggle, you know, with stuff, but God like is guiding me and leading me, and He's equipping me for every good work. Yeah. Anyway, I just want to bless everybody watching this, and yeah, encourage you to seek the Lord. I know that it's difficult to seek God when there's so many distractions, and so yeah, I would encourage everyone to make space to meet with God alone and cut things out of your life which are good but not necessarily God, and cut out the bad stuff too. But yeah, just I don't know. God is Psalm 16:11 says that at God's right hand is the fullness of joy, and we don't have to go to the world to get to be filled up and to be happy. Like we literally can go to God, and like emotionally, like if you're down, like God will make you happy. Like if you seek Him enough, just practically. Um, Anyway, that may be about it for this video, but that's it. I hope you were encouraged. Thanks.